Hi, welcome back for another tutorial with Vintage Market Design Furniture Paint. What we're going to do today is stenciling with two different tones to get a depth and almost a 3D effect that you don't get with just using one color. So I've started out with a sample board. I've primed it with Block It primer, which if this were cherry or mahogany or red oak would keep the tannins from coming through. It's the only product in the whole line that's not low VOC because it has shellac in it, and that's what keeps the tannins from coming through. Then I did 2 coats of my favorite color, which is Antique. It's a really neutral, grayed, creamy white, not too much pink, not too much green, not too much gray. It's a lovely neutral, and we use this a lot. So that's my background. And then I'm going to use one of the Vintage Market Design Creative Studio stencils. This one's one of my favorites. It's got a bird. Anything with a bird on it I love. And this one will fit our sample board pretty easily. And they are made out of kind of a mylar plastic. Scissors here. There you go. And they're child-proof, hard to get into. No. And as a last resort, if you're the type that likes to follow instructions, there's really good instructions on the back for how to do what we're doing tonight. So what I'm going to do is just line up my stencil so it's where I want it to be on this sample. And I like to steady mine with tape because I don't like it to move around once I get started. So I've got some regular painter's tape here, blue tape, which is good. It adheres without taking off the paint surface. And I'm just going to do that on both sides so that my stencil will not move as I'm working on it. And I'm going to be careful not to tape over the parts of the stencil that I actually want to show. You want to do it in such a way that you're not getting a bubble in the middle too. I've got a little bit of a bubble, so I'm not doing the top, I'm just going to do the sides. And then one of the things I really like to do is hold the stencil down as I'm working to make sure that I don't get any bleeding underneath, because that's when you have problems. So it's nice as you go, if you just do small areas and hold them down. In fact, I think I'm going to move that tape a little bit there so I don't get too much of a bubble. There we go, that works better. And one of the products that I love to stencil with is the Crowning Touch. This is a paste material that is good for antiquing and good for giving dimension effects. It's water-based, it's got a little bit of metallic into it, which gives it some slip. It blends easily, it moves easily, and it comes in some amazing colors. The 2 colors I decided to do tonight for my bird are Zinc, which is kind of a dark platinum silver, and Smoky Bronze, which is probably the color I use the most. It's like a Van Dyke brown, really neutral taupey brown, not too much yellow, not too much red. It's great for doing shading. So I'm still having trouble with the bubble here, so I think I'm going to lose this tape on this one side. What you want is for your stencil to lay flat against the surface. And sometimes it's better just to do that with your hands. Okay, so I like to start with the light colors and then work into the dark colors to use them as shading. And I'm using a stencil brush from Vintage Market Design, and the way a stencil brush differs from a regular brush is it's completely flat on the surface. So when you stencil, you're going to dip into your product. I'm going to grab a paper towel here, and you're going to offload the majority of your material. Let me get some paper towel to do that. And you're really using a dry brush technique for stenciling. You don't want to have too much product on your brush, or that's when it starts bleeding underneath and you don't get the really clean edges. And you also don't get the shading. You want to start at the area that you want to be the most dark and go in circular motions and work towards the area that you want to be lighter. And So I would start here in the center with my zinc and work here, and then I would take my darker color, and I like to use 2 brushes when I'm doing 2 colors, and I would use the darker colors around the edges and work them in so that I actually have a shaded effect. So because I'm going for a dry brush effect, I'm not getting very much on the brush, just a little teeny bit. And I'm going to offload most of that. You can see what a nice gray that is, like a silver gray. And I want that to be in the middle of the tail, and a little bit on the breast of the bird, a little bit on the branch. And less is more with this, because you'd be surprised what a nice sharp edge you'll get with a stencil without too much product. And I like to go back to what I've offloaded on the paper towel and use that to go back in and fill in. If I dip back in here, chances are I'm going to have too much. So that's my first color. Then I'm going to go to my second brush and my second color, and I like to work just off the lid much of the time because there's enough there to give me the color I need. And you can see just with that little dip in the lid, that's a lot of color. And then I'm going to go just to the edges, and I like to work around the perimeter and then work my way in. And when you do a dry brush technique like this, it looks very soft and subtle and natural. I'm going to get just a little bit more there. And you'll notice I'm keeping the brush perpendicular to the stencil. You don't want to start doing this, because that's when you get the bristles underneath and you start having problems with it bleeding. And that's about it. I wouldn't do it too strong. And you can see I've held it down the whole time. And so I get a really nice, clean stencil with no bleeding underneath. And the breast of the bird, the middle of the tail, and the branch are nice and silver and luminous from that zinc. The rest of it around the perimeter is dark from the smoky bronze. I'm going to let this dry till it's completely dry, and then I'm going to use a really fun, fairly new sealing product called Matte Finishing Cream to finish it off.